My name is Bianca Whitfield. I'm 32 years old, and I oversee $340 million in annual healthcare claims as the Director of Revenue Cycle Management at Cedar Hollow Health Network. I have a corner office on the fourth floor of a medical campus building, a salary of $210,000 a year, and a job that exists specifically to catch the kind of financial discrepancies most people never think to look for. My family disowned me 8 years ago, the same year I made director at 24 and became the youngest person in my division's history to run a nine-figure budget. I want you to sit with that for a second because in about 11 minutes you're going to watch a woman named Pam Ferris stand in my parents' dining room, open a laminated booklet, and read out loud, line by line, exactly whose name appears next to every single copay for my father's physical therapy, while my sister, mid-toast, champagne glass still raised, watches her own story fall apart in real time. My sister once told our mother, loud enough for me to hear from the next room, she doesn't get to show up now and pretend she cares. I didn't cry. I want you to remember that too. But we're not there yet. If you're new here, go ahead and hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now, because I read every single one of them. Let me take you back to where this actually started. I grew up in Cedar Hollow, North Carolina, in a brick ranch house on Millard Court with my parents, Walter and Denise Whitfield, and my sister Kayla, who is 4 years older than me. My dad worked as a supervisor at a furniture manufacturing plant for 31 years, and my mom kept the books for a local dental office. Kayla was the golden child from as far back as I can remember. Homecoming court, a paid-for wedding in 2014 that cost my parents $34,000, and a boutique home decor shop called Kayla Ray Home that my parents helped launch with an $18,000 loan in 2016. I got good grades, a partial scholarship to Appalachian State, and a part-time job at a billing office that turned into the career I have now. Nobody ever said it out loud, but by the time I was 14, I understood the shape of the family clearly. Kayla was the daughter you celebrated, and I was the daughter you could count on, which in that house were treated as two very different things. By 2018, Kayla Ray Home was failing. She was $61,000 behind on inventory debt, and in March of that year, my parents sat me down at the same kitchen table I'd done homework on for 18 years and asked me to co-sign a $150,000 home equity loan against their house, the house I grew up in, to bail the shop out. I said no once on a Sunday afternoon, March 18th, 2018, with the smell of my mother's pound cake still cooling on the counter. I told them I'd help Kayla build a real recovery plan, connect her with a small business consultant, even review her books for free. I would not put my parents' home at risk for a boutique that had already failed to turn a profit in 2 straight years. My father set his coffee mug down hard enough that it cracked the saucer and said, "So you'll let us lose the house before you lift a finger for your own sister." That single no is the reason everything after it happened. 2 weeks later, on April 1st, 2018, my mother called a family dinner. Kayla sat across from me in a sweater I recognized from my own closet donation pile years earlier. She looked at our mother, not at me, and said she doesn't get to show up now and pretend she cares. My mother nodded and told me that if I couldn't be counted on when it actually mattered, I shouldn't expect to be counted as part of this family going forward. I sat there under the same brass light fixture that had hung above that table since I was 6, and I felt something go very still and very quiet inside me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I told them I loved them. I pushed my chair in, and I left. I was 24 years and 7 months old, and I drove the 14 miles home with the radio off. Year 1, I heard nothing, not a call, not a text, not a single word. Year 2, a Christmas card I mailed to the house came back marked return to sender, still sealed, in December of 2019, and I kept that envelope in a drawer for longer than I'd like to admit. Year 3, I started a folder on my laptop, one I still keep, labeled Whitfield_records, every email, every voicemail transcript, every screenshot, saved with dates and timestamps, not because I planned to use them, but because some part of me needed proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. Year 4, I made director at Cedar Hollow Health Network, and I remember sitting alone in my car in the parking garage afterward, crying for exactly 4 minutes, and then driving home. By year 5, I'd bought a townhouse on Ashcombe Lane, gotten a cat named Ledger, and built a life that had absolutely nothing to do with Millard Court. The person who filled that space wasn't blood. Her name is Grace Liu, and she was my supervisor when I started as a billing analyst at 22, terrified I didn't belong in any meeting I walked into. Grace stayed late 3 nights a week for 2 months teaching me claims adjudication on a whiteboard in her office. She wrote the recommendation letter that got me into the director track at 24. She showed up to my grandmother's funeral in 2021 when nobody from Millard Court thought to call and tell me it had happened at all. She still texts me every Friday at 5 p.m. to ask how Ledger's doing. Grace is 58 now, and she has been more of a mother to me over the last 8 years than the woman who raised me. Then on November 2nd, 2023, my father fell down the back porch stairs at the house on Millard Court, fracturing his hip and suffering nerve damage that left the left side of his body partially paralyzed. My mother called me that night, not out of love, but because his insurance paperwork was a mess and someone at the hospital had mentioned I worked in healthcare finance. I drove out that same evening. I didn't ask questions about the 8 years in between. I just started working the case, because whatever else was true, he was still my father, and the discharge coordinator had no idea what she was doing with his secondary coverage. What I learned digging into his policy was that his rehabilitation at Cedar Hollow Rehabilitation Clinic would run 42 sessions over 14 months, with a copay of $65 per visit after his deductible, roughly $2,730 total, plus another $9,200 in equipment and home modifications his insurance wouldn't fully cover. I didn't announce anything. I quietly optimized his coding to knock $4,100 off the total bill, and I started paying the remaining copays directly through the clinic's online portal under my own name every single week without telling anyone in that house I was doing it. Kayla, meanwhile, started posting Instagram captions about showing up for family, a story of her signing a check at the clinic's front desk for a single $65 visit in January of 2024, captioned, "Whatever it takes for my dad." My cousin Priya forwarded me a screenshot from the family group chat, Whitfield Fam, in March of 2024, where Kayla had written to our mother, "Let her feel guilty enough to send money eventually. That's honestly the whole plan. She owes us anyway." My mother had responded with a heart emoji. Before I did anything else, I called a CPA friend, Marcus Webb, and asked whether quietly covering my father's care could create any legal or tax exposure, or make me responsible for his broader medical debt as next of kin. He confirmed it wouldn't, and that gave me the clarity to keep doing exactly what I'd already decided to do, on my own terms, without asking anyone's permission. My father took his first unassisted steps across the clinic's therapy floor on January 9th, 2026, 14 months after the fall, and my mother planned a celebration dinner at the house on Millard Court for that Saturday, January 17th. I came because Grace told me I'd regret it more if I didn't, and because some part of me wanted to see him walk into that dining room himself. The table was set with my mother's good china, the smell of pot roast and yeast rolls filling the house. 12 of us crowded around the table that had once held the worst conversation of my life. My father walked in using a single cane, slower than he used to, but upright, and the whole room stood up clapping. Kayla stood, raised her champagne glass, and said, "I want to say something. I paid every single copay for Dad's therapy out of my own pocket for 14 months. I sold half my own inventory to do it. That's what family does. That's what showing up looks like." She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. 12 heads turned slightly in my direction anyway. I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I said, calm enough that the whole table went quiet to hear it, "I never needed you to know it was me, Kayla. I needed you to stop needing it to be you." If this is hitting close to home for anyone watching, drop a comment, because I know I'm not the only one who's watched someone else take a bow for something they never actually carried. That's when Pam Ferris, the clinic's billing coordinator, who'd grown close to my father over 14 months of visits, walked in the front door carrying a gift bag, because my mother had invited her as a surprise for Dad. Pam pulled out a laminated booklet, a year of progress keepsake the clinic sometimes made for long-term patients, and handed it to my father, who opened it right there at the table. Pam, not knowing any of the history, said proudly, "We logged every visit and every payment in there for you." Walter, all 42 sessions. My father flipped to the payment page and Pam, glancing over his shoulder, read it out loud without hesitation. Copay received. Weekly, January 2024 through January 2026. Payment method, online portal. Account holder, Bianca Whitfield. She said it 41 times in a row, one line for nearly every session, before she reached the single visit in January of 2020 for that red Kayla Whitfield moss, and stopped, confused by the room's sudden silence. Kayla's face did something I'd never seen it do before. For about 4 seconds, something genuine cracked through. Her mouth opened, her eyes went wide and almost frightened, and she said quietly, "I didn't know you were still doing that." Then, just as fast, the wall went back up and she added, louder, defensive. Well, someone had to actually be here every week, physically in this house, doing the real work, not just wiring money from an office in Ashcombe Lane. It wasn't an evil thing to say. It was, in its own way, true. And I let it sit in the air, because the truth doesn't need me to defend it once it's already been read out loud. What came apart after that wasn't anything I did. 3 weeks later, my mother discovered that Kayla had quietly refinanced her own condo to cover the boutique inventory she claimed to have sold for Dad's care, inventory that, it turned out, had simply been marked down and was still sitting in her stockroom. She hadn't sold anything. She'd borrowed again, the same pattern from 2018, and this time nobody was there to say no. My niece, Kayla's daughter Ruthie, 17 and quietly perceptive, texted me privately 2 days after the dinner to say she'd always suspected something didn't add up and that she was sorry she'd never said anything. I don't know yet what to do with that apology, but I haven't closed the door on her the way the rest of them closed it on me. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's that you don't have to correct the record out loud in a room that's already decided what story it wants to tell. You don't have to fight for the toast, or the credit, or the microphone. Sometimes the paperwork is already sitting in a portal, time-stamped and quiet, waiting for someone else to open it. I paid for my father's recovery because some part of me still loved him, not because I needed a laminated booklet to prove it, and when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't need my voice behind it at all. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't correcting the story yourself. It's simply living a life so well documented that the story corrects itself. If this story meant something to you, subscribe for more, drop a comment, and tell me what you would have said at that table, and share this with anyone who's ever watched someone else take credit for the work they quietly carried. I'll see you in the next one.